Iran was on its way to a young and more industrious, more democratic nation, and then they just got squelched by. It's like it's one guy who ruins it for everybody. Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Pol Pot. You just go on and on. You
Kim.
go over the list.
Yeah,
And how many Moseses do we get? How many Gandhis do we get? How many
yeah,
MLKs do we get? Those are
yeah.
those. Are you going to follow them, or are you going to follow them? Are you with us, or are you with the terrorists? So.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia. And for all those people watching us from around the world, British Columbia is in Canada, and Prince George is in the province of British Columbia. It's about, most people know the city Vancouver or Victoria. We are about 500 miles north, or 800 kilometers for those in Europe, north of Vancouver, which puts us physically in the center of British Columbia. Beautiful province, beautiful day outside. It's about 10 degrees. 2 weeks ago, it was 42 below zero. So the weather is changing. So today we got a very, very special guest. His name is Dr. Robert Wolf, and he is an author, a medical doctor, and has an extremely interesting story. And I'm excited about interviewing him on our podcast today. Do you mind if I call you Robert?
No, please. That's what. People have called me all kinds of names over the years, but Robbie. My mom and dad used to call me Robbie. Actually, Robbie with their Hungarian accents. So that stuck
Right.
with. Even sticks still with my high school, up through high school, and a couple of my college friends. But that's as far as it goes. Rob's good. Robert's a little formal for me. Doctor Rob. People would call me Doctor Robert after the Beatles song. We can go on and on and on. It's a lot of good nicknames.
I'll call you
Wolf,
Rob.
Wolfman Jack. This is our last name is Wolf, but Rob
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Rob's good.
So,
Pleasure meeting
Rob,
you.
where are you located
Right now,
today?
I'm in sunny Florida, and the brightness. It's dark now already because we're on the East Coast.
Sure, sure.
Dark about 6:15 now, but and climbing, which is good. I'm first sunshine to dark, but beautiful down here in Florida. A little chilly here too, but not by your terms. But
No, no. What location?
I'm near Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm about
Okay.
25 minutes from Fort Lauderdale, about less than an hour from Miami, really. So
Yeah, yeah.
I've lived half my life in Michigan and half my life in New England. So I've toured around.
So, give us a big bit of your background from you were born in the United States, I believe, although your parents were from Hungary. You got your education as a medical doctor and then kind of progress from the start going in that direction.
Yes, my parents were both Hungarian. They were both Holocaust survivors, and we'll talk. There's a lot of the book is about all that,
Yeah.
and they survived the communists too. So after everything they went through in the book, here we go. We'll flash forward to 1962. That was my year of birth. My mom and dad moved to Detroit when just about the same time she was pregnant. He got a new job in the Detroit area, and at the time they were living in Boston, and there were no jobs available. But in Detroit there were. And then they ended up in suburban Mount Clemens, suburban Detroit, called a small town called Mount Clemens, because my dad got a newer job, and it ended up being his final job, his lifetime job, his last 24 years of his career. Dad was an OBGYN. He delivered 10,000 babies in his lifetime, which is
What
I
is
don't know,
an you used an acronym?
obstetrician gynecologist, OBGYN,
Yeah.
obstetrician gynecologist.
Yeah.
So he delivered thousands and thousands of babies in his shortened career. His career was shortened for obvious reasons. It's part of the book as well. Um, but yeah, he was proud of what he did. I was proud of him. He would have worked till the day he died. Very successful, very loved in the Jewish community, very loved in the medical community. And I was raised as an only child of only children. Very fortunate. They raised me right. I had good friends and grew up in a town called Mount Clemens, which was about 40% African American. It was a suburb of Detroit. Three Jews in the whole high school. So literally all my friends were Christian. Although I got to say that every kid from my synagogue was a friend. I mean, there was nobody that I wasn't friends with in my synagogue as well. We came from a county called Macomb County, eastern side of Detroit, where there were about 100 Jewish families at the time, and it was thriving back in the 60s and 70s. Now it's sort of a dwindling Jewish population. More of the Jewish population's on the west side, as it always has been. But I was fortunate enough to grow up there, and after that, public high school, college, Tufts University, lucky
Now,
me.
your mom's name is Judith Wolf.
Judit, correct. Yep,
Judith, right? That's
you
kind
did.
of
Judit
the Hungarian version of the first name, right?
of Judy or Judith with an
Yeah,
H. So everybody called her Judy. All her American friends all called her Judy, and her Hungarian friends called her Judit, as my dad did, because so the J was not pronounced with a Y. Judit
right.
is
So
what my
I
dad.
interrupt. I just want to get your mom in there. She's still with us today, is she?
I'm sorry.
She's still alive, correct?
No, my mom passed away. So
Oh,
um,
sorry.
let me give you so I can go a brief thing with the book. So they wrote the book in the 1970s as an autobiography, paper and pencil to typewriter uh, to computer. They wrote it in the 70s, my dad's autobiography, word for word, as though the events had happened the previous day. My mom and dad had amazing memories. The stories they told were very vivid, very vibrant, very accurate. And then flash forward to, and I read it once on a paper and pencil, on paper and pen, on a scribe. I didn't think much of it at the time. And then dad passed in 1997, unfortunately. Mom passed in 2016, unfortunately. And that's what brought me to what was now the disc. The book was the disc. And after mom passed, a historian friend of ours in Michigan gave me the disc and said, "You have to read this." Apparently, she'd already skimmed it or read it. And even then, I didn't think much of it at the time because I was too busy taking care of mom's affairs,
Right,
blah, blah, blah. And then that was a good year. And then I decided to retire for a year. And then a friend of mine, I'm a radiologist and I have been for 30 years. I've kind of
right.
skipped that part, but uh, he asked me to go back to work. And I did to help him out. They were short. And that brought me to the disc. Like Superman's kryptonite, it summoned me. So between reading cases, X-rays, and ultrasound was very simple. I've been working part time for many, many years anyway. But so this was left screen is the cue, the list. The right screen is the images. Now the left screen is the autobiography. The right screen is I'm dictating my dad's story. All of a sudden, a year later, now we're talking 2018, 2019
Is the
biography.
title is where does the title come in? Survivors of the show, or the I'm not sure if I say it correctly. SHOAH.
The Shoah.
Yeah,
Well, that's a different. Well, the Shoah is kind of the general term, right, for the Holocaust. The Shoah,
right.
yeah, Yom HaShoah is the Holocaust Remembrance Day. But the title of my book is Not a Real Enemy: The True Story
Correct.
of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. So I'll show you a
Okay.
copy of the as well. Here's my opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Won 4 awards, which we could talk about because pinch me, I'm dreaming. I mean, I don't even know what that means, except for the fact that we're getting recognition from some important people about good quality work that's important, and we could talk
Exactly.
more about that. But it's just a wonderful thing. 4 awards, and this is my inaugural. This is my my inaugural book, my swan song. So but I'm very grateful to have that kind of recognition. And I owe a lot of that to my co author, Janice Harper, who was part of the history of the book, too. So once the book was done, we tried to query, unsuccessful, showed it to beta readers, ended up with another author's hands, that hooked me up with my co author. And then it was another year or two of editing and made it a special book, even more special than it already was.
So you did it. You finished it in 2022, correct?
Yes, yeah. So now we're talking because I started about 2018. So yeah,
Yeah.
by the time the book was done and 20 edits later, I mean, how many beta reads, edits, historical review, historical confirmation? Yeah, about a 4 year project at a minimum, and well, it's still ongoing because we're still trying to talk about the book and the messages and how important they are. But yeah, at least 4 years, and at least half of that was editing and querying and uh, vetting, trying to find the right agents and publishers, and finally did with
Writing
Am.
is not writing is not easy, correct?
That's that's an
Putting
understatement.
it mild,
Now
putting it
you suck
mild.
me into it. Now you suck me into a 2 hour conversation. No, it's not just writing something on paper, typing it up, handing it into your agent, and sitting back and collecting royalties. No, that's I keep saying that more and more. And in fact, it's putting your car in reverse and going backwards for meters and meters before you finally get it in gear and go. It's really it's a very difficult business. It's fun if you're into it and interesting, but it's not just.
I've
I love when you
done
say.
Yeah, I've done
Go ahead.
four. The fourth one is coming out next this year, August. I quickly show them to you just to kind of say. So the one that I did is an autobiography against all odds, and it's about the challenges up, down, and all the not hoorah hoorah John how successful, but all the challenges along the way. You may find that interesting. I will sign copies of the book and send them to you. The other one is that I was already 57 years old when I picked up a book in a store, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction, and it was about ADHD. And I knew that I had challenges in the area of ADHD, but I didn't know it was ADHD. And I talked about that a lot, and then found that likely 8% of the population, I always thought, had ADHD. It's more like 20 or 25% of the population. In fact, the most successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, 50% of them are likely ADHD. I felt I had to write a book about that. I did, ADHD Unlocked. And then another one that I wrote is that you may find interesting is a lot of people don't like what they are doing, and that I love what I'm doing. I'm living the dream. So I felt I had to write a book about that part. It's so important to do things that you like to do. Make your whole surroundings and the people around you enjoy it more. A lot of people that don't like their jobs or hate their jobs, they don't make them very pleasant to be around. So I wrote a book about that, finding your passion, living the dream. And so, and then I did one more. I'm going to just show you that is coming out next July. Is that I'm 83. I was born in 1940. That'd be interesting to you. It was then the start of the Second World War. We were located in northeastern part of Holland, and we'll talk about that a lot more as well, and all those issues that relate to your past and your family's part. But at 83, I felt that staying fit and healthy, diet and all the things around it these days is how do you stay fit, and diet and all the other things, the medical things around it, and preemptive is important. So I wrote a book about that, and I call it Living Young, Dying Old. That comes out in August. So just to kind of give you a bit of a touch.
Well, I've got to give you a kudos. So that's 4 books. I've got 3 more in my head, but I don't know if I'll even get to the second one. One would be sort of semi-autobiographical. I'd say that 4 times. The first book, I'll do a barter with you. You send me a copy of that one, and I'll send you a copy of mine. But you
Yeah,
only
I will
send me
send you
one.
all three of them.
Oh, that's kind of you. Don't have to do that. But the
Yeah,
ADHD one, you're going to have to send me thousands because you think you're the only one. Back when I
you
was at
like it?
med school, they said, if I remember my numbers, I used to be good with numbers, but they said maybe 1 in 165 had autism. That's the only kind of diagnosis that they had back then. And now there's this whole spectrum and continuum, and we've all got it. We're all overstimulated. There's too much material. I can read a 200-page book, but I can't read a 500-page book. I can wait at McDonald's for 5 minutes, but I can't wait at this place for 7 minutes. I can't even go inside McDonald's and actually shake the hands of the people, use the bathroom, watch how they make my burger. No, it's got to sit out in my car for an extra 10 minutes on my phone, and on and on and on. We got this hurry up and wait. Hurry up we're at the airport 3 hours early. Yay. Oh, we have to wait not line for an hour to get onto our get into our seats. Yay, we've arrived. We've got to wait an hour just to get to our baggage. That's the society we're living in, this hurry up, this stop and go. And
Yeah.
we got to slow it down a little. The book, my dad being on the run all the time, yeah, that slows me down a little bit with my thinking too. I love so ADHD. Good for you because it is a big problem here. It's every other person I know, and we've all had our moments. El Gam Lee is an expression my mom and dad used to say to each other, and I don't know if it's Yiddish or Hebrew or Hungarian, but El Gam Lee, it was be my dad, who was brilliant, would be staring into space, thinking of nothing. It might be just at a bar mitzvah or something, and he's just kind of nursing a drink, not drunk, his first drink, just drinking and taking his mind off of work and just the whole world, and we all have a little of that, and that's part of it. And not only that, so you brought up so many thoughts and pivot. So never too late to pivot. I'm 60 some years old. Pivot. I wrote a book. It's a new passion. It's not. I've done radiology and anatomy and math and science and all of that. Pivot a little. Now I'm doing history and political science. Not political science. I'm not political. I'm just trying to promote peace and the message. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, a great book, a great story, and a story that people could fit themselves into. That's part of the story.
Okay, let
Um,
me share a little bit else that will fit in the things that you will be talking about your family, Hungary, and all the things before, after, during, and all the things that were involved. In particular, it was the Jewish community and all the things relating to that. Is that I was born in, as I said, November the 1st, 1940, in the northeastern part of Holland, within 10 or 15 minutes from the German border. I had one sister 1 year older, one brother 2 years older, and my dad was called into the army April 1940, and the last that we heard from him was that he was caught in the bombing of Rotterdam. And as you know, Rotterdam, the center of Rotterdam was destroyed and killed thousands of people just to hurry the Dutch to capitalize or surrender to the Germans. So it didn't go fast enough, so they bombed it. So then for the next 4 or 5 years, my mom had me. I was born then. She was pregnant with me when my dad left. And so my sister 1 year older, my brother 2 years older. So the first thing that I remembered, I was about 3.5 or 4.5, 4 years old, were hundreds of bombers overhead. I can still remember the sound even now of the bombers. We'll never hear it again. Hundreds of them all at the same time. Again, if you visualize northeastern part of Holland, is where the Allied forces, as they came up through Normandy on the ground, the bombings were going on for day and night side bombings, 1943 forward. And so a lot of times what my mom did, she took us outside on a flat roof to look, not because it was so nice to see, but more she felt safer outside than inside. In the distance we could see, and again visualize, northeastern part of Holland. We were close to the North Sea as it touches Germany and the north. So in the distance we could see Kiel, Bremen, Hamburg, and all those cities that were building weapons for the German army. We saw the skies were red when they were bombed. And then we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. And we saw the time during the time that the Germans were in northern part of Holland and the rest of Holland. There was in 1944, 1945, it was called the Hunger Winter. It was extremely cold and all the food had been cut off. And I still remember that we as kids, I was then and still a little guy of about 4 years old, 4 to 5, and my sister, 1 year older, my brother 2 years older. We would take gunny sacks and we'd go to the railroad yards to pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They boot us one, and then the following day we still came back. We saw far too much that we should not have seen when the Canadians came in, and obviously it was getting close to the German border. They blew up all the bridges, and things got pretty rough. And I still now remember even the cold. I can still feel it now, and the hunger that we had, and then the other part, anxiety of fearing. The only protection that we had as little kids was my mom, and everybody else had the same challenges, so they had to take care of their own families, and so anxiety was a big part of it. And in fact, I got counseling for it well into my 50s, very emotional actually. So PTSD was part of that, leaving that, and then also the inner child. And then I was not very good academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And I felt that I had been a failure. They said, well, what are we going to do with this guy? My parents were very beautiful people, but what are we going to do with him? So we should. Some of them said, well, maybe we send him to a mentally challenged school, or should we teach him a trade? So they chose to send me to a furniture factory, and I became a furniture maker. And then when we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, it made such an impression on me that I always knew that I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. You know, I tried to go when I was 17, they wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted into the to the Dutch Air Force, and then I went to Canada when I was 23. And I felt I had kind of failed, because how it works in Holland is that at some point you're going to get married, you got to get a job, and then, you know, so as you apply for a job or a career, you know, then they say, okay, where are your diplomas? Well, I didn't have any diplomas. So I wanted to start all anew with nothing and go to Canada. I did that when I was 23, 60 years ago. And I wanted to build a lumber mill. And so I left Holland with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and $150. I couldn't speak the language, I didn't know salt, didn't have a job. I knew that the timber or the trees were in British Columbia, so I had to go to British Columbia. And fortunately, when I came to Vancouver, I went to the immigration office, and I talked to, I could speak the language, so unfortunately there was a German fellow there. I could speak some German, so I told them what I wanted to do is build a lumber mill. So he said, Prince George, go to Prince George. So on the bus for 14 hours, and I can still see virtually where the Greyhound station is, sitting here in my apartment here downtown Prince George. And I came off the bus with my suitcase, the 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money 3 times, and I had $25.47. But what I had plenty of is attitude. No matter how tough it is today, I know it's going to be a better day tomorrow. The other one I had is passion. If I give everything to things that I like to do, and I give it 150%. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody, and if you do that, then success will follow. So even still today, I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I always think I'm late. And I always make my bed, and then, you know, and I enjoy every day. I've been quite successful. It's not about that, this conversation. But my attitude, never giving up, has made me fairly successful. I have quite a number of companies, and you know, but I was a late bloomer. What touched me, or what changed me, is that when I noticed that I likely had ADHD, kind of opened the door, and then as I started to evolve quite late in life, I started to write books when I was 62, already thinking about it. And then the last 5, 6 years in particular, I've been very active in podcasting, obviously. I'm a very active speaker on the speaking circuit. And then I write books, and then I still manage close to 10 companies, actually. And I love it. And then so my objective is I want to live till I'm 120. So I'm very conscientious about health, mental health, physical health, diet, and all of those kind of things. So that gives you just a little bit of background of who I am.
Sounds like a parallel to my book. It sounds like you've not only read my book, you've written it, except in different languages, different countries. $150, as Monty Python would say, luxury. I mean, my parents came over with 2 bottles of rum to bribe the border guards, but it's the same thing. I mean, they learned the language, they had the determination, they had the resilience, and even before that, in all the sludge and the mud, the World War II. I mean, you're a 20-some-year-old guy. You know what saves you? Your age. You're male and you're useful, so that saves your life. You suffer a lot, but it saves your life, and you and your friends and another handful of people. So there's that. Determination is just a word that doesn't even describe it. The human integrity, the human, uh, whatever it takes just to survive. You do what you got to do, and it's funny you mentioned the Dutch, because in Michigan, my home state of Michigan, a lot of Dutch people in Michigan. They a lot end up in the western part of Michigan. And one of my best friends growing up since third grade, Tim Goldeman, a Christian guy, he's a dentist in Massachusetts. We're still tight. Another great guy. His family made a new life for themselves. They weren't Jewish, but they came over, and tulip bulbs. So, and it's funny you mentioned furniture or wood, because the wood in the western side of the state is huge. Grand Rapids and that whole area is big with the wood. And we
Exactly.
could talk another hour about how culture and different nations move to different parts of the United States. Some of it's climate, some of it's assimilation, of course. Canada, my cousins live in Toronto, same kind of climate. Hungarians, Orthodox. My dad's distant cousin, they passed away, but my cousins are still around. And they've lived in Toronto for many, many years. Orthodox, one is a dentist, the other one, ironically, runs a furniture store. So,
Amazing,
and
eh?
or nicest people, family. They're not
Yeah.
harming anybody. They're not the ones causing people for all the graffiti and the anti-Semitic remarks and all these gatherings, which slowly, at least, the Canadian authorities are putting a squash to, because it's getting to be too little, too late.
Yeah.
University presidents, whatever. What do I have to do with Gaza? What do you have to do with? You wrote 4 books. You're a successful businessman. I've been a doctor for 30 years. I've been a radiologist. My dad was a doctor. His dad was a dentist. I mean, nobody hurt anybody. They helped people. So it
In
wasn't.
fact, in fact, to the contrary, Rob. Like when I grew up in a culture as you did, is that we want to be part of the community. We will give back to the community, and we are active in the community, and and that's what we do. And when I grew up in Holland, as you well know, it's a mixture of different religions, maybe be Protestant or the Catholic or Jewish, and all of those people are growing up together, and we're all part of the community. And I well remember after the war and all the things that happened, in particular to the community that I was born in northeastern Holland. Most of the Jewish families that live there as part of the community, right up our street, and as part of the whole community, ended up in the concentration camp and never got back, and became one of the 6 million people that were murdered during that war. And the same in Hungary. Hungary to us and to me was always close. I know close to 500,000 Jewish people from Hungary ended up in concentration camps. And I
Even
remember
more,
the
even more. But I mean, the numbers are like a friend here said down here, Avi Hoffman. He's a popular actor down here in Southern Florida. 50 million people died in World War II. He said 50 million. So that's all in. That's soldiers. That's civilians. That's Hungarians. That's Jews, Christians. Disabled people, homosexuals, whatever. If anybody who was in the way of, yeah, I mean,
Gypsies.
of course, the nuclear bombs. And Hungary is little known. So I mean, that's a little niche with my book, is that people know about the France and Normandy and England and Netherlands and Okinawa and Pearl Harbor, but not so much about Hungary. And people are writing about Lithuania and Albania, and it's only, but it's still, to me, it's all death and destruction.
But
It's not what we signed up for. I don't, 911. It wasn't Jewish targets; it was American targets. Muslims
right,
died, Christians died, Jews died in
right.
911. World War
So,
II, same thing.
yeah.
Uh,
So what I remember is 1956. I think it was October the 23rd or so was the
Good
when the
memory.
people rose up in Hungary against the Russian communist dictators, and so I was still in Holland, and we were very much part of that and in support of that. So it made us even more realize, the effects of the Second World War, and then obviously the influence of the Russians in particular to Eastern Europe countries,
But
Hungary,
you and
Poland.
everybody else. Yeah, you and
Yeah,
everybody else. I mean,
yeah,
normal, free-thinking people were thinking that way and hoping, and then they always got squashed. It was always whatever. Same with Iran. Iran was on its way to a young, and more industrious, more democratic nation, and then they just got squelched by. It's like it's one guy who ruins it for everybody. Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Pol Pot. You just go on and on. You
Kim.
go over the list.
Yeah,
And how many Moseses do we get? How many Gandhis do we get? How many
yeah,
MLKs do we get? Those are
yeah,
those. Are you going to follow them, or are you going to follow them? Are you with us, or are you with the terrorists? So
yeah.
Canada and the United States, even more so, need to bind. I mean, I've never had a problem with United States loyalty to Israel, and in my
No,
lifetime, hopefully that doesn't go away. And Canada, I'm not sure. I think so, but both countries are
I
fighting their own
I
little battles.
believe I believe so, Rob. That by and large, those that are knowledgeable, not everybody is, realizes fully what is all involved, what the history is, and the reasons why, and that again is very important. And I believe that as somebody that was born during the war years, Second World War, and saw it, and then another thing that I usually said in my presentation, and I talk about this frequently doing opportunities that present itself doing podcasting or presentations that I make, is that that not many people realize that think that if you have war, that when the war is over, everything goes back to normal. That's not so. It may take a generation, sometimes more than a generation, if ever it gets back to a sense of normality. And I remember even with my dad, when he finally came back after the war was finished, he was never the same, being in the underground, and the toll that it takes, is very, very, very serious, and people never get back to the same again. And and the other part that I do a lot of times is that, especially on Remembrance Day here for the last 10, 12 years, I usually give presentations to at least 4 schools. I'm trying to do 4 schools in different areas, to saying, what does it really mean, the 2 minutes of silence? Why is that so important to remember as to what happened? And, it's always amazing how I feel in a lot of cases there is quite a few hundreds of students from all different ages, how they are interested in it, and you can usually hear a pin drop as they hear about the things that have gone on, and how has affected those people. And then the other part which is important to me is that I fly a lot. I do a lot of business in the United States and all over the place. I'm a pilot, but even commercially flying, I usually sit by the window and I look outside and I say, it's paradise. You know, how lucky we are. And then the other part that I say, how quickly it can change. The democratic system may have flaws, but it's better than the alternative. And I feel that now sometimes in Canada, United States, if you don't believe it is, go visit Russia, try to visit North Korea, go to China, go to Cuba, Venezuela, and
Agreed.
go on and on and on. Is
Go to
that the
Gaza.
option?
If you want to be in Gaza, go to Gaza. If you want to live in
Go
Iran,
to
go to Iran.
go
Get
to
out of my neighborhood.
Iran, you know.
Get out of my. You're in the wrong neighborhood. You brought up so many things that I talk about every day, and you touched on so many. I'm going to give you like a ESPN 30-second bullet if I can, because all right, education. Want to teach the kids. Ultimately, I want my book to be taught in the classroom. Eighth grade, maybe a little young to have them read the book, but they're not too young to hear the speech. College education, college, yeshiva, whatever, it's appropriate. We're going to work on history professors, maybe Canada too, but you start with the U.S. Ukraine, Russia. Let's compare that to 1956 when the war first came out. Ukraine, that's what it was. Now it's the Hungarian Revolution on steroids. Not much we can do about it. U.S. still has they have a responsibility to protect their own people, so they can't get into this all war. Russia knows it. They're taking advantage of it. We're reflecting back. 1933, the 1930s, the uprising, that compare all our protests and everything. So we've got that comparison. Hopefully, it keeps getting squelched. Hopefully, there's the decency, the law and order. Jews have rights to live too. Jews have rights to live in peace. So do the Asians after COVID, and so do the Muslims after 9/11. We're tired of scapegoats and repeat scapegoats. There's that. PTSD. Dad never had it. Unbelievable. Why did Dad never have PTSD? He was lucky, maybe he was just focused. He was disciplined as a kid. He was beaten as a kid sometimes. Maybe that helped him. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it hurt him. Plus the forced labor camps, the discipline, learning to keep your mouth shut, learning to have integrity, learning to be a team player. All those things made him stronger every day. And I don't know how I could have survived all that. I don't know how most people could. We hear about these poor Vietnam vets that have the PTSD. Maybe they don't have enough help. They don't have enough. There's mental health help. We know is a big shortage in the United States. I assume Canada too, with socialized medicine. And if people had more help, that would be. My dad was just he was a workaholic and he was a focused guy and just he had a means to his ends and just appreciated that what he had after he got out of everything that he did and that carries over to anybody who reads this book will say the same thing. Like I'm lucky to have what I have. Like we can complain about our government and this and that, and we're not perfect, but hey, we've got a way better than just one guy again ruining it for billions or millions, and that carries on as well. So, yeah, I was lucky to be educated by my parents. They were Holocaust educators. Mom might have had a little PTSD, but she fought it off by she was part of ORT, and again she was part of the medical community and the Jewish community. She taught about the Holocaust, but they were also history buffs, and they liked opera and theater and music and Dad would take us to all the games in Detroit, the Tigers, Lions, Pistons, Red Wings. Worst neighborhoods ever, scared to death. Not my dad. Nope, 5'6", nothing, not carrying a knife or a gun. But after what he went through, he was fearless. And it was good I had a couple of friends that were kind of a little taller and bigger than me coming with us to the games. And that's how nice he was because Dad didn't even care about sports. He would take us to the games just because he loved me.
Yeah.
It's take his time off from his work that he loved too. Um, so the book, Not a Real Enemy, is all of that in its own little format. Dad was a four-time escape artist, twice from Nazi Hungary, twice from communist Hungary, two forced labor camps. His first is the one that I remember from the first time I read the manuscript. All-out foot race in the middle of the Caspians, middle of nowhere, very, very cold, scared to death, just hours of silence. I don't want to say too much. Not everybody got lucky in that escape, but he and his friend Frank got out and then they had a second escape, and I don't really want to tell too much about that, but it's remember the show Hogan's Heroes or all the Kelly's Heroes and all these miraculous stories that were true. This is true, and it's not the kind of thing you wrote about for years and years until you were sure you were on solid footing. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd brag about. Finally, the Russians take over after the men got shot at. They were unarmed. They were shot at by Russian planes all the time. One of the guys was killed. Another one was a professional musician, and he got paralyzed, so he couldn't. I think he was a composer, if I remember correctly. I've got to reread it, but he got paralyzed, so he couldn't work as a musician ever again. And just stories like that, stories of mental torture, getting urinated on while they're digging trench holes to dig for landmines, to retrieve landmines. Lots of just horrible. Some duties that they would just have just to make them, just to keep them busy, even if it wasn't anything meaningful. So just not pleasant time. Starving most of the time. This painting I've got behind me there is from my dad's office. He's had it for many years. I never really understood it until I did the book and realized how important the peasants were to the survival of these poor gentlemen, these guys that were just in slave labor camp for months and months with no food, and they'd have these little mini barters, or they'd give them food, and all at the risk of torture and homicide at the point of somebody finding out. So there's that and that and that. So finally they're free. They get out of Nazi Hungary. They don't leave, but they're out of that regime now. And now my dad's desperately trying to find out about what his parents' whereabouts was. And it took months and months and months. And he finally, another miracle, he found out from somebody that he just on a chance meeting what their whereabouts was in Auschwitz. It wasn't a good ending. It wasn't happy. A lot of detail. I had to stop working on the book for a while when I read about that, and a lot of people say
Yeah.
that too. It's kind of a quitting point in the book for a while when you actually sit and think, "Oh my God, that's the grandparents I never met." And my mom's grandfather was a rabbi, and he also perished at Auschwitz. And the documentation isn't as good as that as well. But my mom was trying to do some genealogy later in her life, but I think she only went a couple generations back. As you may guess, a lot of the records and papers have gone away. There was no DNA technology back then, and with World War II and all the pillaging and ransacking, exchanging of the homes, people getting taken away, and then replacement tenants. A lot of things got lost in the shuffle. Of course, jewelry and artwork. We all know about all of that too. So whatever I have, I've kept. That's actually been sentimental to my parents. Besides that painting, in the other room, I have a 1909 stained glass window from my parents' temple from Michigan. When they raised it in the 70s, they each of the families got a piece of the temple, which was usually these beautiful stained glass windows. So that's a keeper too. And whatever, a few photos of my grandparents or whatever. So, but my mom went as far as she could with the genealogy. She was bat mitzvahed, by the way, in her 70s, which is kind of cool. So she never got to have that. And of course, they had an illegal Hungarian marriage under Stalin's communist regime, and that whole chapter is a disaster for whoever ran that wedding. They did the civil service, which was funny because it was so disgustingly. I don't know how to describe it. It was just like doing it in the pool hall or whatever. And then they had a nice Jewish real wedding, and basically got busted for it. So that's a whole other chapter too. And we're talking torture, and the communists weren't much better than the Jews than the Nazis, short of rounding them up and corralling them and putting them on trains. It's just as bad. They didn't know what to do with the Jews for work. You mentioned something about what you do for work and what your skills were. In my mom's uncle, who was a clandestine communist, he didn't know where to go. If the communists win, he's okay. If the Nazis win, he's screwed. So he went communist, and that was for his survival. And he was part of the economic plan for Hungary after the war. And there were parts about what are we going to do for work for the Jewish people. Now, can you imagine us saying in this country after a war, Civil War, what are we going to do for, say, the Japanese interns that were held during after World War II, and
Exactly.
on and on and on. We can flash forward the next 70, 80 years. It would be appalling. So, but it was farms and factories. They ended up in farms and factories, and they were short of doctors because of so many people dying in World War II.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got to go back to medical school on a quota, 10% at the most, Jewish, and you take what they give you. Dad was a smart guy, and that's all he wanted to do. So he took the opportunity. So that brings you to the collateral damage you talk about. It's not just about injuries and death, because that's
No.
horrible. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
But being displaced, being a refugee, having to start your life all over again in a different country, losing everybody in your family, losing people right in front of you. whether you're fighting as a buddy. 500,000 Jewish United, 500,000 American men that were Jewish went back from the United States to Europe to fight in World War II
Exactly.
because they had left Europe before, and including that was my mom's boyfriend she had well after my dad passed. And
Yeah.
lucky to have him. He was from down here in Florida, great guy. He just passed a few years ago at 95. A war hero who was a Jewish guy and knew my parents well before
Oh,
they dated. So it's amazing how just a few events can change the lives of so many. And that's the bottom message with the book too: is don't take it for granted. It could be you. It could be a bad neighbor, a bad business deal, a bad local government, a bad federal government, a bad foreign government, a natural disaster. Your life could change in a hurry. You're on the run. You're homeless. You're starving, and that's
th-
really that's kind of the bottom line.
there is something that I'm trying to remember. Maybe you remember it. Is that, making references to Germany and Hitler is saying that first they want after the gypsies, and I wasn't a gypsy, so it didn't affect me, so I said nothing. Then they want to this other group, and I was not one of them, so I said nothing. Then they want after the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I said nothing. And now they're knocking on my door.
Foot in
And
the door technique, they call it. Foot in the door technique. You
right.
once your foot's in the door, it's difficult. You can't own a radio. Now you can't work. Now your kids can't work. Now you can't go out during regular hours. Now you can't go out at all. Now you're my prisoner. Now you're dead. And if you're lucky, you're not tortured. I mean, it's slave
The
labor can't save them, but it's such a paradox. It's so horrible that we still haven't learned. 50 years, 500 years, 5,000 years, mankind
and I'm
keeps.
not sure if we ever will. The only benefit in a way that we have, Rob, you and me, we have been exposed to it. We have seen the horrors that go along with it. And we know and we say in our books, in our presentations, do not take for granted what we have in North America, in Canada, in the United States. Do not believe that the democratic system, as we see now on the news on a daily basis, virtually Canada, United States, it is not perfect. It will never be perfect, but it's much better than the alternative, because the alternative, if you want one dictator, Hitler, Mussolini, Kim, the Iranians, or China, or Russia, Putin, that would be dramatically different. And history already shows us what it can be under those circumstances. So appreciate to what you have, and how fortunate we are. And then the other part that I believe, I look at the Ukraine, and they are shedding their blood and their lives for the rest of us right now as we speak, and that happens in other places as well. And and I think we have to remember that, and saying that, become knowledgeable about how history has taken place in the prime times, that may be the Second World War, the First, through the years, and wherever it is possible, at least share it with young people and others that maybe I have not been as fortunate in a way. I feel, having been exposed to this, I can speak about what happens and what happens to families. And I have an obligation to do that, and so do you.
A big time. I couldn't say it better myself. So, with ever few minutes we have, fighting anti-Semitism, we want it in the classroom. 10% of my author proceeds are going to the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C., and that's an ongoing thing that's in my trust. You can kill me now; they can assassinate me tomorrow. It's going to be an ongoing thing. The book's won 4 awards. It's an adventure. It's highly recommended. And the thing about it is, like, get me into classrooms in Canada, get me some talks in Canada, Indigo bookstores. I've actually pitched the CEO of Indigo bookstores on LinkedIn. I haven't heard back from her. It was only last week, but let's see what she says. This could make it into a movie. Let's teach that kind of thing. It's nobody knew Schindler was until 20 years ago. Nobody knew Anne Frank was until 40 years ago. Nobody knows my dad. Maybe it'll be well past, but they'll see the adventure. They'll see the stories and say, this could be me. And I hope this book does get sold in Canada as well, because Canada needs it just as much as here. Uh, and not only, it's going to be tough to teach the radicals, because the opposite of the radicals are the white supremacists here and the skinheads. And believe me, they're going to hate the radicals as much as they hate the Jews, and we all know it.
Yeah.
What does he say in Driving Miss Daisy? Always going to be the same people, right? So
Right.
I can't educate them all, but this actor down here in the United States, the basketball player, I can't think of the names offhand right away, but more and more and more, we're supposed to be on the same team as people, not as left and right and black and white and Jewish and not. We're supposed to be friends. We're supposed to be brothers.
Show us
I've
your
been
book once more, Rob.
not a real
So,
enemy.
yeah.
It's called Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. Biography about my dad, an adventure. He even missed an escape, and everybody
It,
that went
and
on that escape.
it's on
But
available on all major media.
it's on. You can get an Amazon, of course, and Barnes and Noble. You can get online or walk into a Barnes and Noble store, and it should be on their should be in their system. You can order it that way, and they can have it delivered to you. You can pick it up. Local libraries should have it. If they don't have it, you can ask Walmart. It's on sale at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., which I'm in talks with, hopefully to get a book signing there sometime. With prayers. And then it's at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and my alma mater, Tufts University. It's on sale at their bookstore, too. They have an authors program. It's on sale at least 10 or 15 different Barnes & Noble stores here, Massachusetts, California, Florida. I do book talks. I do podcasts, TV interviews. You ask me to go, I'll go. It's an
Have
important
you got a
one.
website where people that
I
are
do.
watching us from around the world can contact you?
I do. It's robertjwolfmd.com. So it's Robert it's robertjwolfmd.com, and it's Wolf, WOLF. That's my website. If you just Google Robert J. Wolf MD, or if you Google not a real enemy, you'll find me. And I hope to meet a lot more people. I've been meeting interesting people every day, schmoozing with people. We talk about regular stuff too: food, sports, music, just having fun too. But there's also the seriousness of this subject, and it's important to me. It's I got the zap from my parents, and if you knew me 5 years ago, you'd say this. There's no way this guy would be doing this now. And here I am, 61 years old, and I'm doing still a little bit of radiology, but this is kind of my charge.
I love
So
it, Rob. So our podcast is being watched all around the world, and we have lots of people watching it. And the other part I should mention to you, our podcast come out tomorrow, actually within 24 hours. So we don't modify, we don't edit our podcast. Seldom that even in the 206 podcasts that I've done. No, you 209, I believe.
I know you
You know,
said 209.
yeah.
If a
So,
six, if a six turned out to be nine, that's a Jimi Hendrix song. So
so
don't get dyslexic on me yet.
yeah. So the only time that I'm sitting here on the fourth level in an apartment building in Prince George, British Columbia, and at
Beautiful.
one point I introduced a guest, and all of a sudden the whole building started shaking. We had an earthquake, 4.6. We left it
Imagine
in
that.
the podcast. So our podcast, as we did today, that's how you will see it tomorrow.
God bless you. The good Lord's watching over us. God, no more hurricanes, no more disasters. You deserve a lot better, and I hope I get that way someday. I haven't been to the Great Northwest. I'd love to visit sometime if I get up in that corner. My co-author is actually from Washington State, so if she can get me a talk in
He's close
the
by.
Washington, very
And
close,
for all the
pretty
people
close.
that are watching us around the world, is appreciate what we have. There is nothing
Absolutely.
like peace and accepting others that are different, in other ways, but we are all in this world together, and we should avoid dictatorship and and be supportive of those that fight the battles around us. May they be in the Middle East, may they be in the Ukraine, so
Now, most of
Robert,
us aren't into despots and corruption and just general rabble rousing. We're not malfeasance. No, most of us are into peace and quiet. And my dad used to say, "Enjoy every moment." He used to
yeah,
say so with his
I
Hungarian accent,
agree.
and it's true. And he did. He loved his
Yeah,
work. He loved his free time. He loved his family, his friends. When he had the opportunity to finally live his own life, and after many years of real hell, so and it's a good life. I hope nobody has to live like that. And
no,
it was an eye opener for me and for everybody that reads it that talked to me about it. Say it's the same thing. So big game
Robert,
changer.
it was a pleasure to have you on my podcast and a privilege. We'll stay in
Pleasure.
touch. I will send those books out tomorrow to you
Please,
and
with
look
your
forward to
address.
your book. And take care.
God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You too. Take care. Bye.